Good to go.
Okay. So I think it's only recording on your side. But
It should record on your side too.
cool. All right. Well, folks, how you doing today? Michael Zuber, 1 minute at a time. As you can see, we are dual recording this. I'm recording this with Brett Swartz. How you doing, sir?
Hey, I'm Michael. I'm doing great. Great to be on the show, be on the YouTube live, wherever everyone's consuming the content.
Absolutely, man. So, guys, if you don't know, this is actually an interview. Brett interviewed me, I believe, last week, maybe the week before. He talked about something I have never heard of before, but it sounds super cool, super sexy. And I know I would have used this in the past. So before we get into that topic, Brett, why don't you introduce the audience to who is Brett Swartz, what do you do, and all that good stuff?
Yeah. So I'm founder of Capital Gains Tax Solutions. I'm a multifamily broker by trade. Goes back many years, but grew up in the, let's say, one building at a time, building custom homes and doing room additions with my dad and my mom in the
Very
Bay
cool.
Area. So not too far from where you're at in the
Oh,
Fremont,
yeah.
Mission, San Jose area. And now we just help people escape feeling trapped by capital gains tax on the sale of such homes or businesses or cryptocurrency using something that's not a 1031 exchange that we call the Netflix way of exit planning versus Blockbuster.
That is great. Netflix versus Blockbuster. Right now, the millennials are going, Blockbuster, what is that? But, anyways, so this thing is called the Deferred Sales Trust. And again, I freely admit this is something I had not heard of before. I've actually executed multiple 1031 exchanges. They can be cumbersome, they can force bad decisions. I have known many people who completed a 1031 exchange and were left unhappy, left in bad deals. I know lots of people who live in the Bay Area who have significant capital gains above the 250 or 250,000 and $500,000 limits. I know people that have started companies, maybe bought crypto. So I know a lot of people that have large capital gains. And I must admit, I have an MBA. I was a trained accountant and have an econ degree. And I still do not know any details around the deferred sales trust. So what is it? How did I mean? Why do people like me not know about it who probably should know about it? I mean, there's so many questions I have read. It's like blows my mind.
Yeah, let's start with the number one secret, which is this, right? This sounds too good to be true. It seems like my CPA would know about this.
Yeah.
what's the magic or what's behind the
Okay.
scenes here, right? And it's literally one story that I mean, there's multiple stories over the years, but there's one story I just want to tell everybody to give you some confidence, and it starts with a gentleman named Bill Gross. And Bill Gross, for those who don't know, and a lot of real estate people don't necessarily know about him, he's kind of like a Mark Cuban of the financial
Mhm.
advising world, securities world, and very respected, one of the top persons for 30 years, and he grew a company called
Mhm.
Pimco from 80 billion to 1.2 trillion. But he didn't build it by himself. He built it with about five gentlemen, and one in particular, his right hand guy was a guy named David
Mhm.
Young, and they built this worldwide big money management company. And they did it for 15 years. They all retire on a big, kind of golden parachute payday, and they're done. And then four of the five guys get a little bit bored, and they form a group called Anfield Capital, and that's where David comes in, and he gets introduced to the Deferred Sales Trust about 3.5 years ago. And if you can imagine, for some of these guys that are literally managing money for some of the biggest wealth in the world,
Mhm.
wealth, pension funds, big endowments, like they're like the most respected type of group that helps manage these money, and they get approached with people all the time telling them, say, sell my tax deferral strategy to your clients. We can help you do this, do this. And he goes, look, Brett, most of the time I just look at these things and I dismiss them, right?
Right.
Because they don't pass the smell test. They're doing all these things that we just know of over the years. We don't touch them.
Right.
He goes, but the deferred sales trust sounded different because it's just an installment sale, and it's a seller carryback, but
Mm.
it's with this trust. So we knew about installment sales, and
Mhm.
we were familiar with that. And he goes, but we were still very cautious because we weren't sure of this thing was completely legal. But we did a due diligence period, and these guys are all about due diligence.
Sure.
In fact, on companies and on investments, and making sure that they're very thoughtful in their analysis of different things. And so they do it through their analysis, and they didn't do a 2 day or a 2 week or a 2 month. They did a 2 year due diligence.
Mm.
A Going over the banks, the installment sale method, they formed, signing the NDAs, going through it all. And they flew back and they met with my business partner who's a tax attorney, and they sat down, they went through all of the thing on a whiteboard, all of the boxes, which we'll go through here in a minute. But essentially, this is what they found. After 2 years of due diligence, Michael, they found that that's the smartest person we've ever met. We call him the Beethoven of tax, how smart he is, okay? He
Okay.
worked for Arthur Anderson. He's been doing this for 25 years, thousands of closes, billions under management. Has passed the IRS over a dozen times. But number two, they said we're all in. Our tax team, our legal minds, everything else that we've known for 30 years, we're all in on the deferred sales trust. And they became a part of the inner circle, and they can manage money for clients that want their assistance. And they work with our financial advisors that we're partnered with across the U.S. as an extra part of kind of like the dream team to help you build wealth with the deferred sales trust. And so I always ask everyone, Michael, I say, look, if it's good enough for David Young and his legal team, after 2 years of due diligence, and they're some of the smartest folks for 30 years, much smarter than me, right, when it comes to these things in a lot of ways. Is it good enough for you and your legal team? And you can talk with him directly, David directly. And that's the really neat part. They typically are only managing very, very large wealth. But part of when we brought him in, we said, look, if you're going to bring you in, we want you to also help the little guy. The little guy, our minimum is $1 million net proceeds, $1 million gain. And they said, fine, we love the deferred sales trust. We love what it can do for folks. We will help manage money for those who want. It's not a forced. So that's the big domino, if you will, story, if that makes sense.
Okay. All right. You got my interest. This is a place where I play. A lot of the followers on the channel either will play today or will play in the future, right? Real estate is something that goes up, lots of appreciation. And today, lots of us know about 1031 exchanges because it allows us to go bigger. Again, in a market that is at the peak, I think a lot of 1031s today are being done because they have to, not because they should. So it sounds like we have a couple of missing pieces, which I understand. The installment sale is something I'm very comfortable with. I've done seller carryback. I'm very comfortable with installment sales. It's a way to delay taxes. May take it out of year one and delay them going forward. Totally get it. Obviously, I understand trusts. Have those a part of my experience as well. So how do you want to take the audience and myself kind of to the next step? Because so far, I get it.
Yeah, I think my journey will help you guys understand this, and then we'll kind of geek out on some of the details here.
Okay.
And so I'm at Marcus & Millichap. It's 2006, right? The marketplace is all-time high. And for those of you who know Marcus & Millichap, it's one of the top multifamily commercial real estate brokerages really in the world. And we like to be known, we think, like the Navy SEALs, like underwriting, value add, multifamily properties. And so 1031 exchanges, doing all of these things, and things were going really well. 04, 05, 06, and the market all of a sudden starts to get some speed bumps, and then literally hits the wall in 08, right?
Oh yeah.
And a lot of people got hurt. And that's where my story begins. I didn't know anything about a deferred sales trust. I mean, I knew 1031 exchanges. I grew up in the business with rentals and properties.
Sure.
But this sounded like, this crazy Netflix idea of tax deferral, that we didn't know about, just seemed too good to be true. So I'm sitting at Marcus & Millichap. My manager brings my business partner in. He starts talking about the deferred sales trust. And you have to realize this is now in 2009 when I'm learning about it, where everything's been flipped upside down. Clients, friends, and family lose either half, some losing all of their wealth in real estate over the next 2 to 3 years. We're negotiating with banks. I'm working in a side job and hustle at Cheesecake Factory, literally to keep the lights on with my baby daughter at home with my wife, not knowing how I'm gonna keep this thing going. But I loved real estate, and I loved investment real estate, and I loved everything about it. But it was 100% sink or swim environment, right? There's no salary, no benefits. So I'm going through my financial struggles financially, and then personally, and then my clients are too. And we basically identified the 1031 exchange as the enemy in a lot of ways, because they knew for the longest time that they were overpaying, or they weren't necessarily buying a deal based upon the intrinsic value of the real estate. All the things you talk about is run rental all the time. Finding a deal that makes sense based upon the outliers of averages, right? Not just overpaying because you feel trapped by the 30 to 50% capital gains tax, right?
Yeah.
So letting the tax tail wag the investment dog. And that's where people got hurt. I literally met with a gentleman. He had $50 million of mostly C-class apartment buildings. He was leveraged pretty high. And over the next 3 years, he lost everything. He went bankrupt. He had a big old house. He lost everything. And we told him in 06 to sell. And he didn't sell. Now, we didn't know about the deferred sales trust, fair enough, right? Because he was concerned about the 1031 as well at that point.
Sure.
But what the deferred sales trust would have allowed him to do is to sell and to pay off all of his debt. To sell and not have to replace equal or greater value in a 45-day window, 180-day close. To sell and be able to diversify into hard money lending. to stocks, bonds, and mutual funds, to other passive or active real estate deals. In other words, to do what our parents taught us to do, which is the number one reason for the deferred sales trust, which is time, to sell high and buy low. You see, with the deferred sales trust, you no longer ever have to buy something you never want to buy again.
Okay.
You no longer have to be in real estate if you don't want to be into it.
Mm.
In other words, it is the Netflix way of doing things once you understand how it works, and it's just an installment sale method. And so once I figured that out, and by the way, at Cheesecake Factory, I walk in the door and the guy's like, why am I going to hire you? You're going to quit in 2 months when you close a $50,000 commission. I'm like, look, man, I've got a baby at home. I tell you what, I'm desperate. I need this job. Okay. And I will work nights and weekends, but I'm working all day at Marcus and Millichap. And I was ducking out. I mean, I was embarrassed at this point. Like, I'm ducking out of the office. I had the same tie on, Michael, at Cheesecake Factory that I wear at Marcus and Millichap. I just would change my suit. I felt like Clark Kent, right? But sometimes there'd be a client in the other room that I'm cold calling, trying to sell his $3 million building. I remember him sitting there. I'm like, oh my gosh, if he sees me, I'm not going to get his listing, right? I'm selling cheesecake, right? And so this song and dance for 2 years, I go, look, I will give you 2-year commitment, no matter what. No matter what I close, I'll be here for 2 years. And I was able to keep that promise. I started to use the deferred sales trust, and I started to educate people. And people would hang up on me. My CPA's never heard of it, but eventually they started saying, "There's enough pain that maybe if this is true, what you're selling me is Netflix. I will listen, and I will have my CPA look at it." And that began the 10,000 hours of blood, sweat, and tears of going through this with so many deals that eventually I found myself waking up 6 years later. I'm an expert. And people are starting to call me and wanting solutions. And then I start to educate and I start to grow my business. And now I just educate everyone how to do this.
So I want to carry this analogy, and because you're comfortable with it, but I want to make sure the audience is this Blockbuster versus Netflix, right? So Blockbuster, for those that don't know, basically you want to be entertained for a couple hours. You want a movie. You used to have to get in your car, go to the store, have a membership, hope it's in stock. If it is, get it, watch it, and then return it. Otherwise, there were late fees. The Netflix approach is, hey, pay me a fee. You watch unlimited stuff as long as it's in the inventory. It doesn't have really any supply constraints. You just essentially push a button. It streams. You can stop it midway. You can watch it on Monday. You can finish it on Friday. Just a totally different way. That's when you're using the Blockbuster and Netflix. Is that kind of the
100%. It's 100%, right? There's no more 45-day, engagement, 180-day forced marriage.
So there's no more
right?
time.
No more time. And the best deal for that, I'll give you a deal story on that. A gentleman sold in 2006. He saw the height of the market. He says, I'm either going to pay the tax or I'm going to do this deferred sales trust, but I'm not 1031ing. This guy's worth a couple $100 million. This guy hates the stock market. He's made all the money in commercial real estate. So he uses the deferred sales trust for the first time. Now he parks it in conservative stocks, bonds, and mutual funds, stuff that it wasn't subject to the huge crash. Okay, there's ways to hedge and protect and just keep the powder dry. And that's the idea when we're so highly appreciated. Get your powder dry, get out of debt, and get prepared for opportunities. There's always opportunities in every market. I'm not saying that, but he knew for sure, I'm selling 20 million. I don't want to overpay. So he parks it. And 5 years later, the bank calls him back and says, hey, you know that property you sold to that crazy 1031 exchange buyer out of California? He's like, yeah, this guy's in Minnesota. He's like, well, we just foreclosed on it, and we're just curious. Do you want to buy it back?
I've had that conversation.
He goes,
before.
well, maybe. He goes, what's the price? And they go, what, 60 cents on the dollar from what you sold it for? He says, that sounds like a pretty good deal. Give me a couple days.
Yeah.
And he goes to where the funds are at the deferred sales trust, okay, and has them reallocate it, okay, to be able to purchase that real estate at 60 cents on the dollar, all tax deferred, okay? And it's proprietary, it's protected in the way we do this, okay? But he did this, and my brain exploded. I'm going, what? No, you can't do that. That's not 45. That's because it's not a 1031. Understand that IRC 453 is separate than IRC 1031. They're separate tax codes. One's an installment sale, which has no timing restrictions. The other one's a continuity ownership strategy in which you have to follow the guidelines there. It's also why
black and white.
It's also why it doesn't work for cryptocurrency. It doesn't work for a primary home. We just did a primary home in Palo Alto for 8.3 million, right? Above and beyond your 121 exclusion 2 of the last 5 years. Guess what? This gentleman, he owed substantial amount of tax. And so instead of not selling his house, he was able to sell his house. Instead of the broker not doing the deal, he was able to do the deal. He moves to Nevada and he starts receiving installment payments over time. We also did a cryptocurrency deal for a person who worked for Google, and she retired from Google. She bought Bitcoin at 50,000 and went to 50 million. And now she's deferred a huge chunk. She never sold anything until the Deferred Sales Trust deferred 5 million on the first installment. And she's building a business with that, with her business partner, all tax deferred. And these are the things that we teach people how to do, so they never have to do a 1031. 1031 only works for investment property. So those are just two things real fast on timing and actual product.
So what is the, if somebody wanted to Google it, what is the tax code 43C?
IRC 453.
IRC 453. So I'm trying to piece it together as you're going through it. I think I'm starting to get it. So essentially, I want to sell an asset that I own. I'm going to sell it on an installment sale. The transaction goes through. The proceeds, whatever you want to call it, goes to this deferred sales trust. It is this entity. It then has essentially out of that, I structure payments or proceeds or whatever you want to call them. Thus, I'm not paid on the lump sum. I'm paid on only the stream of income I get from that. It sounds like what's happening. And then if I want to use it, i.e. buy 60 cents on the dollar, I go back to this entity, I restructure it. It then becomes assets I could use going forward. It sounds like what you're describing.
Yeah, you nailed it. Just like if you're doing an installment sale.
Just
like if you're doing an installment sale, wonderful. Michael, with a buyer, like Joe down the street wants to buy your $10 million of an apartment complex. You could do 100% financing for Joe.
Absolutely.
Now you wouldn't do that in a real world. Why? Because all of your future's tied to Joe. Second, your funds are illiquid. They're tied to Joe. Third, he's probably paying you 5%. Fourth, he's probably going to refinance and pay you off anyways in the next 2 to 3 years when he adds the value.
That's the big risk. Yes.
Yeah. That's why you're like, most people are like, it's worse than Blockbuster 1031. And then
I can't predict it. It's not predictable. Yeah.
Yeah. And then traditional installment sales like Hollywood Video. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
It's just, you're like, I'd rather do a 1031, right? Like, because also you forfeit the 1031 once you go in and once you go 453, right?
Of course, yeah. So
we're taking all of the best of the installment sale, but we're getting rid of like basically all of the worst, right? And so what we say about Netflix is we add this trust and we say, hey Joe, tell you what, go get a loan for 10 million bucks. Like, we don't care how you get the money, all cash, doesn't matter. But Michael's not going to finance you. However, we're going to ask you to cooperate with this trust, kind of like cooperating with the 1031, right?
Oh, yeah.
And we're going to ask you, it's going to be 3 parties, and basically the trust is going to jump in right in before close of escrow. And Michael, you are going to finance 100% the trust.
Yes.
But here's the cool thing. The collateral can be secured against the biggest companies in the world. Google, Netflix, Home Depot, your own hard money lending, your own real estate purchases, right? All dollar cost averaging. And then the buyer, he actually buys the asset from the trust. The trust establishes a new basis, Michael, right? It bought it for 10 million from you and it sold for 10 million. So it has no gain. The buyer takes title. He's gone. He's happy. Nothing changes for him. And your funds are sitting in a state of deferral, kind of like an IRA, kind of like a 401k, kind of like a 1031. It's kind of like a lot of those things, but it's only going to do business with you. And you have become the lender. Right. And it's owed to you slowly. You'll pay tax.
Yeah. And you can structure the payments however you want to see fit. I forget, installment loans, are there like, you have to accept some proceeds every year? Is that right?
So there are some guidelines to that, right? We do like to see some payments come out within the first couple of years.
Yeah. Okay? You can't just,
it doesn't have to be the full amount, but most of our notes are structured at 8% compounding rate of return, not a guarantee, not a promise.
Yeah.
Okay. So on 10 million, let's say that's, let's say $1 million, that's 80,000 a year. Let's say that was the installment sale, right? Yeah. You don't have to take that 80 in year one. You can let it compound.
Okay.
And then you can let it compound again. And then we like to see some payments start to come out and you'll get a 1099 INT. You'll pay ordinary income tax. And that's how most clients will take it. They'll have interest only payments paying to you. Keep that golden goose. So let's say it's $1 million in this scenario.
Yeah.
Laying the golden egg. What's the golden egg? 8%. 8%. Okay.
Right.
And then they'll
and you pay taxes on the 80 in this example.
Of course. Yes. So it's not tax avoidance. This is tax deferral. However, you might at some point buy a new property and get some more depreciation. And that could potentially do some cost seg to offset. So it's tax optimization. This is how our team's going to work with you here to do that. And in fact, we had a client who sold a $2.6 million business in Alabama, deferred all the tax, and he's building 70 multifamily units, all tax deferred, and partly in partnership with the trust. And that's where he became an owner again, which is really incredible, the way we do it all. And so that's what we want to show and teach people how to do that, so that again, they never feel trapped by capital gains tax ever again. If they're a business professional, they're adding value to their clients, right? They're solving problems, because that's really what we're in the business of doing, is solving problems. We're not in the business of selling tax deferral or selling real estate, or we're in the business of solving problems. And if you can solve enough problems, you can grow your wealth. And we think in a really smart way that you're not having to take on too much debt. You're not having to overpay. You're not having to stay in that house or that cryptocurrency or that business. We just did a deal in New Jersey for a dentist. They were practicing for 25 years. This is their entire net worth, 90% of their net worth, $1.5 million sale, $600,000, about 40% was going to be eaten up by tax. Guess what? They have an extra 600 working for them. And they might ask, well, what's the government charging on that 600 that's owed to them? This is the cool thing, 0%. So it's essentially the government, Michael, is giving you a 0% loan as long as you invest it in businesses, in real estate, and it's investment purpose. It's not into like a primary home where you're spending the money on like a car, right? As long as it has business purpose, it's a study of macroeconomics, which some people go, Brett, this sounds so crazy. How's the IRS win? The IRS absolutely wins, right? Especially someone sitting on Bitcoin or cryptocurrency or a business or real estate and or a primary home that has all of this value, but they haven't tapped into that and put it into the economy because they don't want to pay the tax. And so this unlocks the capital. It gets it working again, which creates more jobs, which guess what? There's taxes there. Guess what? I pay taxes on the fees that I receive, and the financial advisor pays taxes on there. So the commissions, everything is a win-win. And this is why the IRS has looked at it a dozen times and said, hey, there's legitimate business purpose. I'm third-party, unrelated trustee. That's my role. Everything's fair market value. I'm not a cousin to Michael. I wasn't your best man in your wedding. I wasn't an employee. Like if you're the person that we're separated necessarily to keep the integrity of this, right? And that's why they go, these are literally no change audits. The biggest one was in San Diego, California. It was a $125 million deal. And they looked at this and same thing. And the odds of you or me, Michael, having our IRS do a tax audit on us and not have some kind of change on our tax returns is probably 1 in a million. There's going to be a receipt. There's going to be something. They looked at this deal and they said, no change. Perfect. And that's happened over a dozen times. Then there was 3 formal audits. Long Beach, California. They called in the tax attorney and they sat down and they said, we want to see everything. And they said, here's what it is. Here's everything. And they said, this is legal. Most of the IRS wouldn't figure this out, but the IRS agent who's assigned to the case said, I figured it out. It's legal. We just want to make sure there's no trap doors. You're not, because if you're doing this wrong, you can hurt a lot of people. And they're like, nope, this is everything. And they're like, continue as you are. And that was in April 2019. So we just keep doing this. But guess what? Your commercial real estate broker, and I'm a commercial real estate broker myself. I'm with EXP Commercial. I'm a commercial real estate broker, and I still help people do 1031s when it makes sense. Very rarely now these days.
Yeah,
not today, don't want folks. You to know about this.
Yeah.
And neither do the 1031 companies. They don't want you to know about
No,
this.
of course not.
Right?
Yeah,
so
of course not. Yeah. So there's so much here. And again, one of the things that people know about my channel is I only talk about what I'm an expert in, and I know zero about the deferred sales trust. So if somebody's out there today, they're sitting on a large capital gains, how do you want them to reach out? How do they want them to research? What should they do? Should they just, what do you want them to do? Where do you want them to go?
It's all about education, right? So they go to our YouTube channel, Capital Gains Tax Solutions. They go to our podcast, Capital Gains Tax Solutions, and you can start to absorb this, okay? We do have a free mastermind. We want to invite everyone who's Michael's listeners. You can register for free, and you can go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com, and it's every Friday at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, 1 p.m. Eastern, where we literally bring on clients. We bring on commercial real estate professionals, financial advisors, CPAs, and we're just in a mastermind room, and we're just trying to make this thing simple for people, okay? And it happens every Friday, so you can register there. Also, if you have a live deal, like if you're like, Brett, I'm looking to sell in the next 30, 60, 90 days, like I'm in escrow or I'm in a 1031 exchange. By the way, we can save a failed 1031 exchange. You know, Warren Buffett says, you see who's been skinny dipping when the tide comes out.
Oh, yeah.
We don't want you guys in a 1031 exchange thinking everything's good, and then the tide rolls out and you're running out of time, and all of a sudden you're standing vulnerable, okay? So we can literally save failed 1031 exchange. I think we've saved already 7 in the last 7 months, okay? Multiple exchanges. We can save it past the 45-day. So if you have an exchange that's going to fail or that's past the days, we can save it, okay? Now, we do want to encourage you to work with our qualified intermediaries who are strategic alliances. One's actually right in your backyard, Michael, okay? And because, again, not every 1031 exchange wants to cooperate with this because we are their competitor and we are the Netflix to their Blockbuster, okay? So, yeah, go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. And if you have a live deal, you can schedule a consultation with myself or one of my team members. Now, here's the key. It needs to be $1 million net proceeds and $1 million gain per transaction. I'll say that again. At least $1 million net proceeds and $1 million gain per transaction, unless you have two, like say houses or two properties or two assets that are 500 each that you're going to be selling in a short period of time. You're asking why? Well, we found that the value of the deferred sales trust is capital gains tax deferral, and it needs to be big enough in order to pay for our fees.
Absolutely.
Our fees are about 1.5% to set it up on a one-time fee, and then about 1.85 to 2% on a recurring fee. Just depends on how and where the funds are invested.
Understood.
And that's where we use that 30 to 50% gauge. So if you're selling at $1 million and let's say you had a 40% tax, that's $400,000.
Yeah.
That's substantial.
Yeah.
Or even $300,000. That's substantial. And that's how we can make sense of the fees. Stuff that's smaller than that, generally speaking, it can still be a potential deal, but on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being like a home run, it goes down as your gain is lower and therefore your liability is lower, or as the trust is smaller. Does that make sense, Michael?
Absolutely. No, there's always a place where it makes sense and it doesn't. I like the fact that you have these rules. And Brett, one more time, where do you want them to go?
CapitalGainsTaxSolutions.com, CapitalGainsTaxSolutions.com.
This has been so much fun. I love it when people bring things I know nothing about. I have more stuff to research. Thanks, Brett.
You're welcome, Michael. Thanks for having me. All right, that's a wrap.
Yep.
Cool.
I think you have to stop it.
Yeah, oh, here it is. Okay, so I'm going to click on the square button there.